Hi, everybody. Welcome to TESOL 2250. This is week 10, day 1. And I just want to go over today some genitive nouns and pronouns. We'll have some practice sentences on the screen, but try to do these as much as you can. We'll go over how to do them in class as well. Okay, so let's talk about genitive nouns. And what is a genitive noun? Well, this is often referred to as a possessive noun. And these are what we get when we have an apostrophe S that we add to a noun. So, for example, I can say the chancellor's instructions. Now, the chancellor's, in this case, we add that apostrophe S. They're saying kind of like the chancellor possesses the instructions. Another way that we can say that is to say the instructions of the chancellor. And this is what we call an of phrase or a phrasal possessive. So these are another kind of possessive. Here again is another example. The reporter's assignment was inner city gangs. Now this apostrophe S we see here is what we call a genitive noun. And then here's the example I used earlier. The campus police ignored the instructions of the university chancellor. So in this case, we have this of phrase, and then the possessor, the university chancellor, and then instructions comes first. These are two different constructions. Now this one again is called a phrasal possessive. So it consists of a preposition plus a noun phrase. Now sometimes we can inflect a phrasal possessive. So I can say the campus police ignored the university chancellor's instructions. And here we have this apostrophe S, so we can change it from one form to another. We can either use the of phrase or we can use the apostrophe S. And that's what we did here. We just changed this example of the university chancellor from a phrasal possessive into an apostrophe S genitive noun. Sometimes that doesn't work though. Sometimes we can't inflect the phrasal possessive. So for example, if I say patterns of behavior, this is a phrasal possessive. Again, it's a little bit hard to understand it as a possessive, but that's what it is, because we see this noun and then of, and then another noun here. But when we try to reverse it, we don't say behaviors patterns. That doesn't work. We have to say behavior patterns. So in this case, we can kind of say that this is sort of like a noun functioning as an adjective in a way. So we use the term genitive whenever we have these genitive apostrophe S nouns, but we don't really call them possessive. And the reason that is because, as we saw in the previous example, many cases of so-called possession don't actually indicate that something is being possessed. So again, patterns of behavior or behavior patterns, it's hard to tell that something is being possessed in that instance. And even with what seem to be more straightforward examples, we can't really necessarily consider this to be possession. So for example, if I say J.K. Rowling's book, is this the book that belongs to the author, or is it the book that the author wrote? It's hard to say, right? If I say the destruction of the city, well, the city doesn't physically actually possess destruction. Well, we can understand that the city is imbued with destruction, so to speak. Same here. Her parents consent. And in this case, the parents don't literally possess the consent. Maybe it's just kind of under their control. So we don't really use the word possessive whenever we see one of these apostrophe S's. We're going to call it a genitive noun instead. So you see that apostrophe S in the first and the third example. We're going to indicate that that's going to be a genitive noun. We're going to write it as G-E-N and capital N above the apostrophe S word. And this is true for both, singular words and plural, as we have here in example 1 and 3. So this is kind of interesting. Some students will ask, well, okay, we have this of here, and we consider this to be separate from the rest of the genitive or a phrasal genitive phrase. We consider it to be a preposition, meaning that it forms a constituent with the noun phrase that follows it. But we don't do this with pre-articles. And let me show you an example of this. So let's look at a pre-article. There are a couple of high school teachers in the hall. Now, if you remember correctly, the pre-article couple of is going to be all analyzed as one chunk. So we're not going to analyze the, internal parts of that of. We're not going to call that a preposition because it doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't go with high school teachers. And what definitely tells us that that's a pre-article is because we actually pronounce it differently. We say there are a couple of high school teachers. We kind of see that as one unit. In contrast, if I look at a genitive, a phrasal genitive, we're going to see that of actually does go with the noun phrase that follows it. So we have to analyze it as a preposition. We have, I never followed the instructions of high school teachers. So in this case, the instructions belong to the high school teacher, high school teachers rather. But here we have to actually analyze of as a preposition. And high school teachers is going to be a noun phrase that follows it. So the important thing to remember is that genitive nouns are not determiners. They're not determiners like possessive pronouns are. And the pre-article of, we do not analyze. The genitive of, we need to analyze in our trees as well, because we can see that it makes a constituent with the noun phrase that follows, and that's not what's happening in the pre-article. Now, again, another point is that genitives are not determiners like possessive pronouns. Determiners like possessive pronouns are going to pick out members of a set denoted by the noun, and they're very general. So for example, if I say her bird, if I use the possessive pronoun her, well, I'm thinking about all of the birds in the universe, and her refers to whatever female happens to own a bird. And so it's going to pick out the specific member from that set of birds, namely one that belongs to a female individual. But it's still pretty general, and her really depends on the context, of knowing which one we're talking about. Whereas genitive nouns are very specific, and they refer to just one particular possessor, but they're not really picking out members of a set of the noun that follows it. So for example, if I say Marla's bird, well, it's not that necessarily the case that there's, all the birds in the universe, and there is one unique member for Marla and one unique bird for Marla and one unique bird for Toby and one unique bird for so on and so forth, until we get every person in the universe who could potentially possess a bird. That's a little bit strange, right? That is too specific. So this is why we don't label genitives as determiners. Remember, determiners are very general. They pick out a member of a set of the noun, whereas genitive nouns are very specific to one individual. So now let's talk a little bit about pronouns. Now we're going to get back to we're going to do a lot of practice with genitives, but we need to do that in class because it gets a little bit confusing without a diagram of these. So you'll see that I don't have any genitive practice sentences on, not right now in the slides. And that's because I really want us to do that together. But we will look at pronouns, and those are a little bit easier to diagram and try on your own. So we're expanding noun phrases. That's what we've been doing this week and last week. And we're looking at all of the ways in which we can expand a noun phrase. Now, last week we looked at determiners. Now we're looking at what can actually go in those noun phrase slots. And we'll start with pronouns. So pronouns, you can have, well, 3 different types. You can have personal pronouns, reflexive pronouns, and indefinite pronouns. So personal pronouns are pronouns that refer to previously mentioned nouns, and I previously mentioned persons specifically. That's why we call them personal pronouns. So for example, if I have a few sentences here, the president had a bad day with congressional leaders. He couldn't get them to support the tax package. Now, in this case, he refers to the president. What was mentioned in the previous sentence context. Them refers to congressional leaders, also mentioned in the previous sentence context. So these are our personal pronouns. Again, these pronouns always stand in for another noun. In this case, one that was previously mentioned. So we have the subject forms of the personal pronoun, and we have the object form of the personal pronouns. And on our trees, we're not going to differentiate the difference between the subject and the object form of the personal pronoun. We're just going to write personal pronoun, or more specifically, we're going to write P-E-R-S-P-R-O-N. Whenever we see any one of these things, it doesn't matter if it's the subject or the object, but I want you to have this chart here so that you do recognize when you're looking at a personal pronoun, regardless of what form it's in, subject or object. So these are things like I in the subject form, me in the object form, you in both the subject and object form, he, she, or it in the subject form, him, her, or it in the object form, we in the subject form, us in the object form, you or you all to be the plural second person. That can be a you in a subject or object form, and then they in subject form and them in object form. So these are pretty straightforward. As I said before, if you see one of these in a noun phrase slot, you're just going to write personal pronoun over the top of that. Now, once again, these are not determiners. They are actually filling noun phrase slots. So we're not going to be writing any determiners above these. So the practice for personal pronouns is going to be, we congratulated her on the promotion. We're going to do this one in class on Friday. Okay, so reflexive pronouns. These are pronouns that refer to actions that one does to oneself. So for example, the graduating seniors threw themselves a party. So they threw a party and it came back to them. So these are things that end in self or selves if they're in the plural form. So myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, those are singular forms. And our plural forms are going to be ourselves, for second person, yourselves, and themselves. So reflexive pronouns are a little bit interesting because you might be looking at this sentence and thinking, okay, well, the beginning of the sentence is the graduating seniors, and then I have the verb, and then I have themselves. So themselves refers back to the graduating seniors here. And, you know, that kind of looks like, well, maybe it's a predicate noun, right? Because predicate nouns often refer back to the subject and tell something about the subject in the case of linking verbs and be. But that's not actually what's going on. You see, themselves is not giving any new information about the subject, unlike what we would see with a linking verb. So, for example, my sister became a pilot. Now, a pilot is new information that links to my sister in the subject. So it's that subject complement we were talking about before. Whereas themselves doesn't give us any new information. And for this reason, we're going to actually analyze this as a direct object. Themselves is going to be a direct object. Through is a VT verb. So it's not a linking verb. So I want you to try to do practice doing a reflexive pronoun. And I want you to practice with these sentences. Max groomed himself. She congratulated herself on the promotion. So in this case, you can just write ref, P-R-O-N, to indicate reflexive pronoun whenever you see any of those words. Okay, so the last one, oops, I forgot to put it in the title, but this should just say indefinite pronouns. So the last one is an indefinite pronoun. Now, this refers to nobody in particular, but it just is required because we have to have something in that noun slot. So these are words that end in buddy, thing, or one, like somebody or something. And here I have circled a list of all of our indefinite pronouns. These can also include nothing and no one, everyone. Now that's an interesting one. It's an indefinite pronoun because you're not really referring to any one particular person. So here's our list of indefinite pronouns here. And this is taken from a textbook that we have as a reference text for this class. It's in your syllabus. As I mentioned in my announcement, if you would like to borrow that book, it's got a lot more examples of trees. And, if you prefer a little bit more explanation or something that you can read and refer to and review, you can borrow that book anytime you want from me. So let's look at a couple of these sentences. Don't you want somebody to love? Or there's something happening here. A couple of lyrics to a couple of songs. Now here, somebody and something are indefinite pronouns. So the way you're going to write indefinite pronouns is you're going to write indef pron, I-N-D-E-F P-R-O-N, to indicate an indefinite pronoun. And you can try to diagram this sentence on your own. Again, we'll review it on Friday and see how we did. Our sentences are somebody is in the building and anyone can use a Mac. So those are our practice sentences. I'm going to have quite a few genitives for us to diagram, genitive nouns for us to diagram on Friday. And I may throw a couple of them in early if you have the chance and you want to do a little extra practice. But otherwise, I'll see you guys on Friday. Have a great day.